Okay, Bezat Hashem. So once again, we are continuing on hilchot Shabbat through the Lamited Melachot. We are now getting to something that actually comes up very, very, very often on Shabbat, um, and there's three parts to it. Each one is its own category. Bezat Hashem will talk about each one on their own. So the first the first step is I'm going to call it by the general term that it's known, and then further divide it into each of the categories. So the first category is the general category is borer, separating. And we know that we're obviously not allowed to separate on Shabbat, and this category of separating is divided into three avot menachot. There's three main categories that are fit under this category. The first one is zoreh. Okay, so zoreh is winnowing, borer is separating, and meraked is going to be sifting. So those are the three categories that technically they're all more or less the same, but each one has their their small differences. So we start with zoreh, Bezrat Hashem. Okay, zoreh, like we said, is winnowing. Winnowing is is basically when we do the separating by or with the wind, with wind, and then Torah would be with a mouth, with a mouth. What does that mean? In the Mishkan or in the olden days, what they would do is in order to separate the good from the bad, what they would do the first step they would do is they would take like a pitchfork or something of the sort, like a type of shovel. They would throw, they would like scoop up a whole bunch of wheat stalks. They would scoop up a whole bunch of you know produce, and they would, or grains more accurately, they would throw it up in the air, and then the wind would come and it would take all the light stuff, it would blow it away, and the heavier stuff, which is the grains and all that, they would fall directly back down in the place where he threw it. So there would be a separation being done. It wasn't with his act, meaning the act of separating wasn't done by him directly. It was done through the wind. But it was his act that caused it to happen, meaning his act of throwing it up in the air is what caused the separation to be able to happen. Okay? Now, this is something that maybe we don't have it so well. I mean, most of us are not farmers, we're not in the field, we don't do these type of things, but there are still some aspects where this can affect our day-to-day life. So we're going to give an example of one that I'm sure happens often enough, is very often when we eat nut mixes or peanuts, especially peanuts if we have them with their peels, right? So you have a whole basket, you have a whole jar, you have a whole can, whatever it is. It's with peanuts mixed with a bunch of peels. Now, it can be very frustrating and it can be very annoying to have to fish out all the actual peanuts from the peels, because you have tons of peels, but you have the peanuts and you don't want to get all those peels. So what do? You simply scoop up a whole handful or whatever it is, and you blow on them. You blow on it, and of course the peels are very, very light. What ends up happening is all the peels end up flying, and then you're left with the peanuts in your hand. That would not be allowed to be done on Shabbat. This can happen with peanuts. It can happen with all these nut mixes. It can happen with many other things. When you're separating things by blowing on them, it's a problem. You cannot be doing that on Shabbat. Another form of this can happen is when you're throwing food to animals from a high place. Okay, so when you're throwing food to animals from a higher place, what happens is the wind obviously takes the lighter stuff, it blows it away further, and the heavier stuff they go, they fall closer. It's important to note that uh, for those that live next to water, this comes up. I know I've been asked this question before. Would you be allowed to throw leftover challah Okay, would you be able to throw leftover challah to the fish? Right? Baruch Hashem, we live in Miami. We have a lot of lakes. We have a lot of bodies of water around. Some live on the bay, on the ocean, whatever it is. And they feel bad. They don't want to throw out the food. So what they decide to do is we're going to throw this food at least to the fish, so at least the food doesn't go to the garbage. There isn't so much of aside for the problem of possibly being zoreh, okay, possibly, but there would be a different problem with that, meaning you would not be allowed to throw the food into the canal, into the bay, into a lake, for a simple reason, because that is going to be called hotza'ah milshut l'reshut. It's going to be considered carrying. Okay, so even if you have an eruv, but the eruv doesn't cover, especially the ocean and the canal and the bay, it doesn't cover those areas. So if you were to throw it off of a bridge, you were to throw it off your backyard in the whatever it is, you would not be allowed to do that. Not only because of zoreh, if there is a problem of zoreh in that specific case, but also because of hotza'ah. So it's important. It's important not to do that. Another form, which isn't agreed upon all opinions, is the person has to be careful of spitting on Shabbat. Why? Because if a person is spitting from a high place for whatever reason, usually kids do that to fool around. Okay, they go up to high places, they're on a high balcony, and they want to see how far they can spit. Obviously, it's not proper. It shouldn't be done, but something like that could happen. There are some opinions that say that since the wind is likely to split it apart, you would not be allowed to do that. Obviously, if it's spitting onto the grass, that's another problem. But even if it's just onto cement, it shouldn't be done. Rav Ovadia Yosef doesn't agree with that. He says it's fine because there's nothing that's being split over here, meaning it's the same thing that's being split in two. So there's no separating being done. For this reason, he says also, for example, this year, Bezat Hashem, 5785, Tafshin Pei, we have Pesach that falls out, the first night of Pesach falls out on Motzei Shabbat, okay? Which basically means that the last time that we can eat chametz is Shabbat morning. Now we know that we obviously cannot do bi'ul chametz in the traditional form of burning on Shabbat, right? So for those that want to do the bi'ul chametz, they do it. They do it on Friday morning. So, but on the other hand, we still end up eating on Shabbat. We still end up eating chametz Shabbat morning. We have to be careful with the timings and everything, but we still end up eating chametz Shabbat morning. So a person eats it, and now he doesn't have to finish the whole meal before the time. He only has to finish eating chametz, and then he wants to just take the chametz that's left over and do another form of bi'ul chametz, of getting rid of the chametz, where Chachamim, they say in the Mishnah that mifarero bizlorko leruach. What a person can do is a person can make the chametz into crumbs and then throw it to the wind. So once again, there are some opinions that say that you shouldn't be doing that because it's zohe, it's going to be considered winnowing. And then Rav Ovadia says the same thing. He says you're not separating anything over here, so it wouldn't be a problem. Another possibility of zohe, which can be common, and would be spraying all types of sprays. What does that mean? When a person takes air freshener, for example, okay, so when you spray it, what you're basically doing is you're spreading out all the water or all the whatever you want to call the perfume into the air. Okay, the same thing would apply to perfumes. Putting perfumes on Shabbat in general, there's another problem with it, which is called molid. Molid means when you're giving birth to something new, you're creating something new. Meaning, when a person sprays perfume, okay, so when a person sprays perfume, they spray it directly on their skin. At that point, when it's on their skin, what it's able to do is, meaning the perfume that's on the skin can go to, or can um, perfume another garment or perfume another thing. This is not something that was like that before Shabbat. So when you do something like that on Shabbat, it's basically creating something new. You're creating a new smell on something that it was. So when you're spraying perfume, it shouldn't be sprayed directly on Shabbat, directly onto the person Shabbat. What some people like to do is they spray it in the air and then they kind of walk right into it. Okay, if it's if it's not if it's also not such a strong perfume, if it's also going to be like done from far away, those are other ways that can possibly be allowed. But yeah, perfume per se is a little bit problematic to spray on Shabbat, not because of the spraying part, but because of um, Molid. Like we said, he's creating something. He's creating a new smell. He's creating something that's smelling new on Shabbat. The other sprays that we have, air freshener, like we said, air freshener it's to the air, it's not on a person, so it just stays in the air. That wouldn't be a problem. Another form of spraying on Shabbat, and this, like I'm gonna say, has another problem, but we can address that as well, would be to spray raid or to spray types of insecticides, right? Sprays that will kill insects. So what we have to be careful of when we spray these things is, first and foremost, you would not be allowed to spray them directly on the bugs. Meaning, yes, I understand if there's a cockroach in the house, you want to kill it. You want to get it out of your sight. You don't want to see it. You don't want to, get it anywhere close. But you would not be allowed to spray or kill it no matter what on Shabbat. You're not able to kill a cockroach on Shabbat. The cockroach, there's no actual physical danger to a cockroach, as opposed to like a venomous snake, possibly. Okay. Um, so a cockroach or even mosquitoes, right? You have mosquitoes in the house, you have flies in the house, you want to spray them, you want to get them away. You will not be allowed to spray on them directly. Okay, like we said previously, there's no problem with the spraying part itself. The problem would be more with killing them. So if you would want to spray these type of insecticides, what you would have to do is you would have to make sure that you're never spraying directly on the insect. You're spraying um, somewhat away from it, and you would also have to make sure that you leave a door or a window open so that they can easily run out from that area. Okay, to make sure that your act is not the act that is killing it. The only thing that technically we have to like that would be a little bit problematic when it comes to the sprays would be for the Ashkenazim would be to open a new spray. What I mean by open a new spray is if there would be some sort of plastic piece that blocks it from working in the beginning. Yeah, and then the spray only would be able to start being used if you break off that plastic piece. That would be considered like opening soda cans. That would be considered like opening all sorts of conserves, right, or pickled goods that now it's making a new utensil. So they would not be able to do that. But the actual spraying, once again, is not a problem. Something that would be similar to this, would fit basically under the same category, would be adding water to a humidifier on Shabbat. Okay. There's no problem with doing it per se, but obviously you have to be careful that if whatever you're doing is not um would not be involved afterwards with Chilul Shabbat. So, for example, if your humidifier has a light that says add water, and now you're going to add water, it's going to turn off the light. Or if when you pick up or you pull out the water thing, the water tank, there's a light that turns on. You would have to be careful of those things, but the act per se of adding water to your humidifier, even though now the water is now going to evaporate, right, and it's going to basically be spread out in the air, there there is no actual problem with that. Okay, so this is more or less the melacha of zoreh, winnowing. Now we get to the halacha, which is a lot more common in our day-to-day, in our Shabbat day-to-day. And it's obviously the melacha called borer itself, of separating. Now, when it gets to separating, there are quite a few differences in regard to this between the Ashkenazim and the Sfaradim.
Rabbi, can I just ask a question before
Yes.
you move on? Regarding
Yes,
you spray insect repellent on yourself or like on your kid? Let's say, like the insect spray because you don't want to get bitten by bugs.
very good. So you would have to respect the same rule more or less with perfume. Okay, if it's scented, you'd have to make sure that the scent is not, meaning it's not enough scent when it's on your skin. When you're spraying it on your skin, you have to make sure that it's not going to be enough to be able to scent something else afterwards. Meaning, I spray it on my skin, and then I like, let's say I rub a cloth on it. Is the cloth now going to start smelling because of what I just put on my skin or not? If the cloth, meaning a third object or a third material, is going to get the smell from me rubbing, then it's a problem. If not, then it's not a problem. Another problem that would possibly arise when you're spraying it on yourself would be like to rub it in. Okay, so for Ashkenazim that's more of a problem. For Sfaradim it would be less of a problem. To basically rub into your skin, to like, actually no, it's liquid, so it wouldn't be so much of a problem. Okay, so that the only thing you really need to be careful of mostly would be the smell, if it's something that smells. Okay.
Directly, but why can't you directly put perfume on just skin, not your clothing?
So clothing, basically, for sure not, because clothing, most of the time when you spray it on your clothing, it's going to be able to affect other things as well, right?
Why is that an issue, spraying it onto your wrist or your neck?
So again, when you spray it enough that it's able to pass on the smell to something else, so you now kind of created something new on Shabbat. Molid reach, it's called in Hebrew.
I don't know what the humidifier does, but definitely when you put some water on the humidifier, like you change like one status of the water, like let's say to evaporate, no? I don't know how it works, but
Yes, yes.
are transforming water into something different. So
You're not transforming water into something different. You're just it's there's nothing different going on over here. What you're just doing is you're evaporating the water. The water's evaporated water is technically still water.
does
Right?
it
It's
warm?
just being like molecules or whatever it is being broken down. It's like you're spreading out the water really thinly. So like we were saying, that when you're spraying something, so you're taking the water, the liquid that's in the can, that's in the spray, whatever, in the bottle, whatever it is, and you're basically spreading it out really thin. And that's basically what happens with the humidifier. You're doing basically the same thing, but it's very, very thin, because the steam that is coming out is still technically, or the, like, whatever that cloud that's coming out is still technically water. Right? When you cook with steam, it's still considered to be cooking with water. Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, sorry, one more question about the wind.
Okay.
I think you were talking, I wasn't sure what you said. Let's say you have, you're cleaning your tablecloth and you take it and you kind of dump it outside. It's like flying a bit in the wind because the crumbs are gonna like fly away. Are you allowed to
Very
do?
good. So you would, again, you would be allowed to do that. You would be allowed to do that, but you would have to be careful. Like I said, if you were to do that into a lake or something like that, right? into the lake, into a body of water, and then you would have to be careful of carrying more than just the throwing it to the wind. Okay.
Right. That's the question, just about the tablecloth.
Yes, B'ezrat Hashem.
I know we're not supposed to walk on crumbs of bread, so if like we shake the tablecloth outside, is it okay if someone walks on the crumbs potentially? Or there's no, it's like this.
It's still very good. The Gemara does say that when it comes to crumbs is kashe la'aniyut, meaning if a person isn't respectful towards the crumbs, it's it leaves a possibility for like let's say the angels to kind of prosecute him or to speak badly about him, and then that can chas v'shalom cause a person to become poor. The Gemara goes on and tells us about how there was this person that he was extremely careful with crumbs, meaning no matter what the situation was, he was always careful to like gather the crumbs and depose them and like get rid of them in a very respectful manner. And the Gemara says that one time he was sitting on the grass and he was eating his bread, and there was some crumbs that fell out, and the malach, the angel in charge of poverty, he's standing on the side, and he was like, okay, I'm finally gonna get this person. I'm finally gonna be able to affect him. And then when this person finished eating, what he did was he brought a shovel and he took all these crumbs and he dug up the earth around where he was sitting. He dug up the earth of where he was sitting, and then he took all of this and he threw all of it into a body of water that was next to him. And then the angel right afterwards said, he's like, okay, I'm never, like he said in the language of the Gemara, he's like, okay, I understand that I'm never going to be able to affect this person. I'm never going to be able to get close to this person. So it depends on in what manner you're doing it. It depends on how you're doing it. If you're doing it in a disrespectful manner, you don't technically respect the crumbs, or you're doing it just to get rid of them, then yes, it's not proper to do it in that manner. However, if you're doing it, let's say you're doing it to like feed the birds, or you're doing it, feeding the birds might be a problem, might be a different problem on Shabbat, but you're doing it in a respectful manner. As long as you're not behaving disrespectful for it, it would be okay. I personally wouldn't do something like that. Normally what we do is, we take a small bag, we try to gather all the pieces of bread that are left over on the table, put them in the bag, and then also, like kind of brush off whatever crumbs we have. Or when you have a plastic tablecloth, you roll up the tablecloth together with all the crumbs. That would be like the better solution. The better solution, of course, is obviously to gather what you can like yourself, and make sure to sweep whatever you have. Okay. All right. So getting to the main category of borer. Okay. The main category of borer, separating, we obviously know is separating the good from the bad. So if we have good, a mixture of good and bad things, okay, when we say good and bad, I'm referring to it right now, and we're going to see as we go along that it's not so simple. But let's say I have a bunch of rocks mixed in with, or some pebbles mixed in with some food, with nuts. Okay, for example, I would not be allowed to take out the rocks to leave the nuts. When we get to borer, it's very, very, very important to know the three rules, the three main categories of borer. Okay, there are three conditions that must be met in order to be able to do borer on Shabbat. The first one is that it has to be done by hand. Okay, by hand and not with a utensil. By yad velo bakli. It has to be done by hand and not with a utensil. When we say by hand, it doesn't rule out a fork or a knife or a spoon. Those are considered extensions of your hand. When we're referring to utensil, it's mostly utensils that are meant uh, to separate it with. Okay, so you obviously have a sifter, which is the next melacha that we're going to talk about, Bezat Hashem, melaked, and you have all sorts of other utensils that could be used for for separating. Another very common example would be a lemon juicer or a fruit juicer, right? You have, even if it's the manual ones, but you have over there that small rack that's basically preventing the pits from falling into where the juice is. That's 100% not allowed to be used on Shabbat. So like we said, the first condition is it has to be bayad velo bikli, with your hand and not with your utensil. The second condition that must be met is when you're separating, it has to be that you're taking the good from the bad and not the bad from the good. Okay? So you're taking whatever you want and you're leaving whatever you don't want. And the third condition is it has to be done for right away and not for after time. Okay, not delayed. There are different opinions for this last one, meaning what is considered for right away, what is considered for right now. Rav Ovadia says that the right away is basically from the time it takes the men to leave shul to come home. Okay, so let's say they finish shul, they're leaving shul at around 11 o'clock, and the meal is basically right after when the men are coming home. So you would be allowed to start doing borer, obviously in the permissible manner, starting from 11 o'clock. Okay, you would not be able to start that before. You would not be able to start it before you go to shul, which means that any form of separating would not be allowed to be done, even if it's in the permitted manner, if it's too early, if it's too much in advance. Another thing that you have to be very, very careful of when it gets to the time of separating is that you would not be able to separate now for another meal later on. Okay, so that's pretty obvious, but it goes even a little bit further to say that I would not be allowed to add on to what I'm separating now for a future meal. So let's say I'm making enough of a quantity to last me for 2 meals, right? So comes Friday night, we're preparing the meal for Friday night, we're doing whatever we're doing, we do the borer in the permitted manner for the meal that we're gonna eat, and we do extra for tomorrow's meal, right? Once we're preparing the whole salad, whatever salad it is, okay, we're preparing the salad, and we say, okay, I'm preparing this, and I know that I'm going to leave over for tomorrow because, it's a shame to make it twice. I might as well just make one big quantity. You would not be allowed to separate in that circumstance. You would not be allowed to separate in that manner. You would have to separate only what's reasonable for that meal. Now, you don't have to be precise. You don't say, okay, there's 5 people sitting down, each person eats 1 piece, so I can only do 5 pieces, for example. You do a quantity that is normal to be consumed. And if there's some left over, okay, there's some left over. It's not the end of the world. Okay? Yes?
Regarding the timeline. So for instance, if we have to prepare a cucumber salad on Shabbat, okay, for Shabbat lunch, or no, yeah, for Shabbat lunch, we cannot do it until our husband are supposed to leave shul, because it means that we're not going to be at the table before that, right?
So very good. So with preparing a cucumber salad is not necessarily, there's no, at least from what I'm familiar with, there wouldn't be really borer involved.
But you separate the peel, if you peel it, for instance.
Okay, so separating a peel, it's important to know, and separating a peel is not really separating.
Okay.
Okay, when we separate a peel, when we separate, again, this is more for Sfaradim. When we separate a peel, what we're doing is we're it's like we're cutting a fruit. Now, in general, you shouldn't be doing these things too much in advance, anyways, unless it's like time constraining. It's really like necessary to do it, because when you're making the salad, there would be another problem afterwards of like adding the salt and adding the you know adding the spices to it, which again you can do in and Bezat Hashem, as we get along, go along, we're going to learn that there's a specific order in order to make like a dressing for a salad, right? We have to be careful with that also. So if it's just to cut things, then it's fine. Again, but in general, you should be doing these things, yes, only as much time as it takes for it to be considered like it's the meal, right? If you need all that time to prepare for the meal before, okay, as long as you're doing it consistently, and you're not.
It's not borer, like, would you consider like preparing some nuts, as you say, like pistachios? Or no, because anyways, we cannot eat them without separating the fruit from the shell.
So with pistachios, what do you mean? You mean to open the shell and then to serve it like that, open. So you shouldn't be doing that regardless. In general, when we talk about opening the shells, and like we mentioned last time, that for Chabad, you have to be careful with opening pistachios regardless. But when we open the pistachios, you should be opening and eating, right? You shouldn't be opening a whole large quantity and serving it like that. Each person should open what they're planning to eat basically right away. So that's again, with pistachios, it would be a different issue.
Are the
Same with you're preparing for the children, like if they want pistachios, okay, as they're eating, I'm opening one for them.
Sorry, I didn't get that clearly.
If we're serving pistachios to the children, it's also as if when they're immediately eating it, not like I'm making a whole lot, like a handful.
Exactly. So it happens very often that your child wants to eat those pistachios and they sit on your lap and you're not interested in doing one by one. So you open a few and you put them in front of the kid and the kid starts eating it basically right away. That would be okay. Because it's like literally it's happening at that moment. Okay, but in general, for you, like when a person is eating them, a person shouldn't be opening like for others or just like opening and serving it like that. Each one opens their own and each one eats it basically right away.
So would an example be like, let's say you're cutting avocado and there's a brown part of the avocado, you don't want to cut it. So if you're taking that brown part off, that's borer. But if you're cutting the proper, just the green, and you're taking the green, then that doesn't count because you're going to use the green.
So very good. When it comes to removing rotten parts of fruit, you would be allowed to do that. Meaning, it doesn't fit into the category of necessarily like bolel per se, which means that you would have to take the good from the bad. You would be when it comes to like rotten parts of fruit, you would be allowed to take that rotten part directly off and throw it out. Okay.
Would you give us an example then that is time sensitive?
Yeah.
In terms of preparation, so we make sure we understand well?
Okay. A person is preparing a salad. Okay, and this is a like, it's a little bit of a trick, but when we squeeze lemon into a salad, what happens is very often you're left with the pit. Now, many people don't like to serve a salad with lemon pits, right? So you want to take out the lemon pits before. Normally speaking, if you were to take out the lemon pits as is, it would be boel, because you're taking out you're taking out the bad parts, right? The lemon pits from the good. So what a possible solution to get around that would be is if you take the lemon pits and you suck them a little bit. When you suck them, you're basically now you turn the pits into kind of food. You turn them into good, because if you're sucking them for the juice of it, whatever it is, then you turned it into food. And at that moment, once they basically touch your mouth, once they go into your mouth, it is no longer taking the bad from the good. But to do something like that, you would have to do it close to the meal. Okay. Another example, something that I think might come up more often, is if you're preparing, let's say you have fish. Okay. Now, what happens often enough is a person is preparing two types of fish in the same pot, in the same pan. Okay, two types of fish in the same pan. Now, Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to learn it a little bit more in detail as we go along, but to separate the two types of fish is considered to be borer. Okay, so doing that, you shouldn't. There are ways, and like we said, Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to talk about it more, but there are ways to do it. But even the ways to do it, you would have to make sure that you do it close to the meal. Meaning you shouldn't, there are many things of the meal that you shouldn't be preparing too far ahead of the meal. Okay, if it's the actual like preparation of the food, things that involve separating, you would have to be careful with that.
The two fishes are good. You're not separating nothing bad from nothing good. You're separating two good things.
Very good. But when it's two different types of food, when it's two different types of fish, and that's why I made sure to say that it's two different fish. If it was big pieces and small pieces of fish, there's no problem because it's all the same thing. You're not separating anything. Okay. Another example. Now that we were talking about that, right? The Moroccan fish. The Moroccan fish is the fish. You have the peppers, you have the chickpeas, you have the garlic, you have all that stuff going on over there in the pot. Now, when you serve the fish, you want to serve the fish, only the fish. You don't want to serve the chickpeas. So what do? You take out the fish, okay, and you leave the chickpeas behind. So you're taking out the good, but and you're doing it with your hand, but you cannot do it too far ahead of the meal. This could be very practical when it comes to Shabbat morning, especially for the Sfaradim, because for the Sfaradim, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to get to this when we do hilchot Shabbat, when we do hilchot bishul, cooking, we shouldn't be heating or warming up anything that has liquid. Okay, there are ways around it, but so what does a person want to do? They say, okay, I won't cook with the liquid. I'm going to take out the fish as it is. I'm going to heat up the fish on the prata, and then I'm going to serve it Shabbat morning, and it's going to be warm. Yeah.
A misunderstanding. It's not good and not good. It's what you want and what you don't want, right? Because she said like
We're going to get there. Yeah, we're going to get there.
If you want the salmon and you don't want the white fish, then it's considered salmon is what he says is good because that's what you want. But
No,
you can, or if you want the chickpeas and you don't want the
like you have another fina and you put a plate, the potatoes and the meat and the eggs, nothing is bad. You know what I mean? Just displaying in a way that you want to do it. It doesn't mean that you're separating bad for good. You may want meat, I may want egg, but I'm not separating bad from good. I may have 3 types of fish and I want to put the red fish here, the blue fish here, and the pink fish here, whatever. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It means that they're fish. You understand? Maybe I want
100%. 100%, and that's why I didn't mention that. But even so, when you're separating them, you shouldn't do it too far ahead of the meal. It should be closer to the meal.
Then it's gonna get cold.
yeah.
Warm it up together, I guess. Warm it up together, and then separate it when you bring it to the table.
I serve everything. Some people like whatever fish they serve. Like you put 10 salads in the table, you eat what you want. It doesn't mean that you are saying this is bad, this is good. You like
No, 100%, and that's why I didn't bring that up. That's why I didn't bring the concept of what's good and bad up yet. But the concept is, again, when you, I think the chickpeas would be a better example of it. When you you separate the fish from the chickpeas to warm up only the fish, right? And so that there shouldn't be any sauce or anything wet with it. If you're doing that too far ahead of the meal, that's a problem, right? So you wanna, like we said, the men leave the shul at, let's say, 11. Okay, so at 10:30 you want to separate the fish from the from the from the chickpeas to put it on the plata to heat up, right? So you're doing it in a permitted way. You're doing it you're taking out the good from the bad, and you're doing it with your hand, meaning you're doing it with a fork or even like a spatula. That's fine, but then you're doing it too far ahead of the time. That wouldn't be okay.
Let me ask you a question. When you have fish, and let's say you want to warm up fish, like I personally don't warm up fish that is being cooked before in a sauce, because when you put it to warm, like the fish when it's cold, have certain way when you warm it, it brings liquid, like it's like stuck in there, you know what I mean? Like there is nothing you can do. When you put a fish like a fish in the fridge and you cook it like the day before, and you want to take it out the next day, let's say to warm it, like you're saying, like if you take only the fish, even if it's nothing there, like it's already like stuck with the fish, the sauce, like let's say any type of fish that you cook with the sauce, when you take it out from the fridge, the sauce is like there. It's like in a form of gel or whatever, but it's there inside the fish. So when you warm it, this liquid like comes like there.
So very good. So if it's in the gel form, even for the Sfaradim, there's no problem, because the gel form is considered to be solid, even though when you heat it up afterwards. And Bezat Hashem, this is more for bishul. This is more for the category of bishul than for borer. But when you heat it up, even when you're going to heat it up, it's going to turn into a liquid. It's still not a problem on Shabbat. Okay, because when you put it onto the plata, when you put it onto the heating surface, at that point it was a solid. Okay, and aside from that, there is also I personally don't really like this too much, right? The Moroccans are a little bit more strict, if I recall correctly, when it comes to this, but Rav Ovadia does permit something like this. He says it depends on the majority of what's being heated up. Meaning, so let's say I take the fish, right? Sorry, I take the fish. There's a little bit of liquid stuck to the fish. Normally, the way the Sfaradim mostly understand it is, as soon as there's a drop of liquid, it's asur. You cannot heat it up. The only thing you can technically heat up, like giving an example, of course, it's only an example, would be like schnitzel or rice, right? If you're going to heat up rice, there's no liquid in the rice. It's completely dry. If you're going to be heating up schnitzel is completely dry. There's no liquid. So those are the things that you would be allowed to heat up for the Sfaradim. Rav Ovadia adds, and he says a chidush, something like, something new, something novel. He says that even if there is a little bit of liquid, as long as the majority is dry, it would be okay to reheat it. Again, that's Rav Ovadia. Like I said, most of the Moroccans don't go with that. Rav Mesaz doesn't agree with that. The Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't say that. Rav Ovadia says that there was a problem with the version of the Shulchan Aruch, so that's why he says it would be allowed. But that would be another form of leniency, that as long as there's only a little bit of liquid, you can still reheat it. Okay. Now, those were the three conditions. Those were the three conditions that a person needs to have, that a person needs to have in order to do boler. First one, once again, is if it's with his hand, or like, fork, knife, spoon, that would be okay, and not with a utensil. The second one that we said is that it has to be, he's separating the good from the bad and not the bad from the good. And the third one, we said that it has to be done right away and not for after time. For the Ashkenazim, many of the Ashkenazim are even more strict and say not when the husband leaves the shul, rather literally right before the meal. That's the only time that you can start doing the bolev. Now, we mentioned this very briefly as we were speaking before, that the concept of what does it mean good from the bad. Now, when we say good from the bad, it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be something bad. Right? It doesn't necessarily have to mean that, for example, there's a hair, or something, like a toy fell into the food, and now you want to take out the toy, or something similar to that. That's not what bad necessarily means. Bad means anything that I don't want at that moment. So I'll give the classic example of a person has like an Israeli salad in front of him. Okay, Israeli salad is cucumbers, tomatoes, and sometimes you can add in onions as well. Now, there are many people that either they don't like the tomatoes, either they don't like the cucumbers, or they don't like the onions, but they like the rest of it. You would not be allowed to take out whatever you don't want. So let's say the person doesn't like the onions. You would not be allowed to take out the onions and then start eating the cucumbers and the tomatoes. You would have to take away the cucumbers and tomatoes, and by eating the cucumbers and tomatoes, the onions are left. That's how you would have to do it. Another possibility to get around that problem, that specific problem, would be if the onions that you don't want, what you're able to do is you find someone else at the table that does like the onions. Okay? And you take those onions and you give them directly to that person. Now, it's important to know that you can't really like trick the system or say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the onions out and I'm going to put them back into the main salad bowl. Okay? You would not be able to do that because that technically is the same bolev, is the same as regular bolev. But when you separate the onions and you give the onions directly to someone else, since at the end of the day the onions actually is food, so you're not separating anything bad here because someone else wants it. When you put it back to the bowl, there's no someone else. It's a general thing. It's something general. So there would be a problem if you put it back into the bowl. But if you give it directly to someone else, there's no problem. Another solution that we gave for the bad was if a person is going to like suck on it, if a person is going to eat it. Those were some ways of getting out of taking the bad from the good. Be'ezrat Hashem, like next week, hopefully we're going to go a little bit more into these, into the like the smaller details and different cases of Boel Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so we'll stop here for hilchot Shabbat.
Thank you so much. I wanted to know, did you say that that you could put the onions back into the big bowl?
No, absolutely not. You would be allowed to give it to someone else's plate directly, someone else that likes the onions. You can give it to them directly, but you would not be able to put it back into the main one, because when you're giving it to another person and that other person is going to eat it, so you didn't separate bad from good, it was good from good. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be eaten.
So good from bad and bad from good is only talking about all like edible food. If it's obviously like moldy or like the avocado or whatever, you want.
So like we said, mold, you would be allowed to remove moldy. It happens very often in lettuce. It happens like lettuce and stuff like that. You would be allowed to remove the outer layers to get to the inner ones, no problem. That wouldn't be considered a bolet.
That's not good from bad. That's just like garbage versus.
Again, it just because that's what facilitates or that's what allows you to reach to reach the good. We're going to learn Be'ezrat Hashem that if you're just moving the whatever it is that's bad to the side in order to be able to reach the good, meaning you're not able to reach the good without moving what's bad to the side, you would be allowed to do that too, even if it's bad. But Be'ezrat Hashem, even though that Be'ezrat Hashem, like we're gonna learn a little bit more in detail after. Okay, I saw a quick question over here. Would I be able to squeeze a lemon and then leave the seeds in my hand? Like squeeze the lemon through my hand, leave the seeds in my hand? No, once again, because that would be still considered bolel. You're separating the bad from the good. Okay, what should be done is you squeeze it directly, and besides, for the fact that we said you need to squeeze the lemon onto the food directly. If you were to squeeze the lemon into your hand, that would be squeezing that would be squeezing a fruit for its juice, which you would not be allowed to do.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So, any other questions?
Thank you so much, Raf. I'm
Okay,
good.
you're welcome. So we'll stop here, Shabbat, and